and welcome back to Rap Cinema. Today we will be talking about a movie where a group of people have been mysteriously put into this gigantic maze, with no memory of their previous lives, and they have to fight for their lives to escape. So sit back, relax and enjoy. The movie starts with the main protagonist, Thomas, waking up in an elevator, known as the box. He is coughing and sweating intensely, until the box drastically speeds up out of nowhere. The box stops and alarms start ringing. The overhead doors open, and bright lights come shining through, almost blinding Thomas. A bunch of men, known as bladers, are shown, hovering over Thomas, which begins to confuse him. One of the bladers, Gally, opens the elevator door and jumps down to get a closer look at Thomas and then throws him up onto the grass, and everyone continues to circle him. His fight or flight senses kicked in, but he chose flight and begins to run away, but trips over nothing and tumbles to the ground. He is thrown into a pit and the other men lock it. He gets up and tries to have another look around until a man appears from nowhere, making him fall to the ground like a pussy. This man's name is Albie, who begins to talk to him and states that he will not run again. From this, Albie unlocks the pit for Thomas, but continues to ask him if he remembers anything about himself, but Thomas has no idea, saying that he cannot remember a thing. The camera skips to showing the gigantic, stone maze, known as the Glade, that they are all trapped in. Albie shows Thomas around and explains that a box comes once a month with fresh supplies and a new person, known as a greenie. Thomas is introduced to the second in command, Newt, as well one of the best characters, Chuck, who begins to talk about his experience in the Glade, but Thomas walks away towards the massive doorway. Chuck runs after him, confused at what he's doing, but soon finds out that he wants to see what's behind the wall. They finally stop in their path as Chuck begins to say he doesn't know what's behind the wall. The runners are shown leaving the doorway, confusing Thomas as he was told no one is allowed to leave. It is revealed that the runners are the only ones allowed to leave. They know the most about the maze than anyone else. Thomas walks closer to the entrance of the maze. But as he walks closer, Gally rushes over and pushes him to the ground like he weighs nothing. Gally stands over him, but Thomas kicks him away and crawls off. The commotion is heard and everyone rushes over to them. Throughout the arguing, noises are heard coming from the walls, causing them all to turn around. The inside of the maze is shown, with dust and wind flying towards them. The noises get louder and the walls begin to slowly close. Later that night, they are carrying out a special event and begin celebrating. The camera skips to Thomas and Newt talking. Newt introduces him to the runners, detailing how Minnow is the captain of them. But Thomas is shocked to find out that they have been looking for 3 years and haven't found anything. Near the end of the conversation, Newt explains that there are these dangerous creatures, known as grievers, who roam the maze whenever the walls close. Thomas is heckled to wrestle Gally, so Thomas agrees as is able to get Gally to the ground, but is soon kicked to the floor as well, whacking his head. However, this caused him to slightly get his memory back and he now knows his name, which everyone begins to celebrate. The next day, Thomas goes into the forest to dig up more fertilizer. He comes across a grave and notices skulls and bones lying on the floor. He brushes this off and stands up to walk away, but he notices one of the runners standing behind him, called Ben, slouched over and breathing heavy. Thomas is visibly confused as Ben begins to growl at him, for some weird reason. Out of nowhere, Ben leaps onto him, causing them to fall to the ground. While wrestling on the ground, Ben starts to blame Thomas for something unknown and then strangles him. Thomas grabs a skull and hits Ben over the head with it, causing him to fall off him, and they start to run through the forest. They make it out and Thomas begins to scream for help, but is tackled to the ground again. Everyone notices this and rushes to his aid, and Newt hits Ben with a stick, almost knocking him out. Multiple bladers pin him to the ground and lift his shirt up to reveal that he has been stung by some creature and he is going through what's known as the changing. Later that day, bladers are gathered near the entrance to the maze, with large sticks, while Ben is thrown into the middle, with all of the sticks pointing towards him. He pleads for help, but no one listens to him. The walls begin to close, causing the bladers to force him into the maze. He is finally pushed beyond the entrance, forcing him to quickly run to the other side so that he doesn't turn into an empty toothpaste wrapper. The camera cuts to Thomas having flashbacks of the elevator, a brown-haired woman and another woman saying that Wicked is good. He soon wakes up from this dream, just in time to see the Minnow and also Albie start their day of running into the maze. Later that day, everyone grows concerned as the runners should be back by now. Once the rain stops, they all gather around the entrance to the maze, looking out for the runners, but the noises are heard from the walls again, indicating that the runners don't have long left. The walls begin to close, but they notice the runners coming round the corner. However, something is wrong as they see that Minnow is holding Albie over his back. The wall is getting closer to closing over, all while Minnow is struggling desperately to make it to the other end. Thomas ignores all of the rules and fears and rushes through the closing walls to help. He makes it through just in time as the walls close milliseconds behind him. Thomas walks over to the runners, lying defeatedly on the floor, and ensures that Albie is okay, but Minnow reveals that Albie was stung. They walk through the maze, carrying Albie, but they set him down as they start to hear weird noises. They realize that they'll never survive if they have to carry Albie the whole way, so they try to come up with a plan to hide him for the night. Minnow gets aggressive with Thomas and begins to argue with him, but Thomas notices ivy on the wall and walks over to it. He comes up with a plan to hide him in the ivy, so they tie a rope around him and attach it high up the ivy and frantically attempt to pull him up. With Albie almost up the ivy, Minnow stops pulling and looks around the corner to see a griever looking at them. Out of fear, Minnow runs away, leaving Thomas holding the rope that has Albie attached to it. With the griever herd slowly walking closer to Thomas, he crawls underneath the ivy and hides. This robotic-like creature walks right past him. Thomas notices a branch that he can tie the rope around, so that Albie doesn't plummet to the ground, but while he is checking its security, the griever is hurt again. He finishes and rushes around the corner, just in time as the griever is seen appearing from another corner. He walks away from Albie, but steps on a gooey substance, catching his attention. While he looks around confused, more gooey stuff falls on his shoulder, so he looks up, but finds another griever right above him, which drops down right in front of him. He runs away but doesn't make it very far as he runs into a dead end, but with the griever right behind him, he turns into Spider-Man and climbs up the wall and continues to run, until he makes it to the edge of the platform. He tries to run back, but this creature appears right behind him. With no other choice, he runs and leaps off the edge and grabs onto the ivy on the other wall, but the griever follows and lands under him and attempts to impale him, but he cuts the ivy he was holding onto and he slowly descends, but as they're moving down, the ivy detaches from the walls and they both hit the ground. The griever is now stuck in the ivy, giving Thomas time to run away, but as he looks back, he is jump scared by Minnow. They begin to run away again, but they encounter a section of the maze that is changing, revealing an opportunity to lose the griever. Minnow runs down the path, but Thomas stays still with the hope to grab its attention, which works and it begins to chase him down the pathway. With the walls coming closer together and with the griever on his tail, he is about to make it through the other side. But the camera goes dark, and skips to Chuck waiting patiently for them as the entrance to the maze slowly opens. With there being no one at the end of the path, they all move away, until they notice all three of them walking towards the entrance. The bladers run towards them and grab Albie to set him on the ground. Later on that day, they are having a group meeting, but loud sirens are heard from outside, so they rush outside, and run over to the box as that's where the noise was coming from. It's another greenie, but this time, it's a girl, and it's soon revealed that she is called Teresa. The men gather around her like cavemen seeing fire for the first time. Newt notices a note in her hand and reads it out, which concerns and confuses everyone. During the amount of confusion, Teresa wakes up, saying Thomas's name, causing everyone to look at him. After visiting Teresa in her hospital bed, Thomas is eager to go back into the maze, so he rushes out of the hospital, but is stopped by Minnow. Thomas reveals that he wants to go back into the maze to find the dead griever to see what they are up against. They meet in the forest again, but with additional manpower this time. They run to the maze and navigate through it, until they spot the dead griever. Thomas notices a red flashing light in the griever and Minnow walks over and attempts to grab it, but the griever moves a tiny bit, pushing them back in fear. They all begin to pull on the griever, but only the arm comes off. However, whenever the arm came off, the red flashing light fell off too, which Minnow grabs. They are visibly confused at what the object is, but they don't have time to discuss it, so they walk back to the glade. Those that went into the maze meet with Gally and Newt to discuss what they found, but Gally disregards the discussion and suggests that he needs to be punished, which Newt agrees with but also states that Thomas will be a runner, starting the next day. Later on that day, Minnow leads Thomas to a hut that contains a 3D map of the maze. Minnow reveals that he has run every single inch of the map and has not found any exit, but he hasn't told the rest of the bladers so that they believe that there is a chance of getting out. However, Thomas is filled with hope as Minnow explains in detail how the maze works and that there are 8 sections to it, which only one is open at a time. They are interrupted by 2 bladers, stating that Teresa has finally woken up. They run to the watchtower, just to find her throwing stuff down at everyone. Thomas gets up to the top of the tower to find Teresa in the corner holding a machete up. He explains what has happened and that she will not remember anything, but to Thomas's surprise, she remembers her name. After building a trust between them, Teresa uncovers that she found 2 syringes in her pocket, which they realize are cures for the stings. They all rush to Albie and Thomas goes to inject him with the cure, but Albie angrily grabs him and begins to say similar things to what Ben said when he got infected. They finally inject him, which puts him to sleep. Later that night, Gally leads him to the pit for his punishment. The next morning Minnow unlocks the pit to let Thomas out as they have a big day of exploring. As they are running through the maze, they get to section 7, but 7 is not supposed to be open for another week, confusing Minnow. Buzzing noises are heard from the device that they received from the Griever. They slowly walk around and the device gets louder and quieter, depending on where they are, indicating that it is showing them the way. They follow the device's noises, until they come to another entrance, but Minnow has never been here before. They walk down the path, but get to a dead end. As they are about to walk back, the device's light goes from red to green, and the wall opens up, uncovering a potential way out. They walk to this new opening, but it just seems like a massive dark tunnel. Thomas and Minnow get jump scared as alarms begin to sound. They begin to run back as the walls start to close down. They're seen running through a section of the maze with blades as walls, but as they are running, they begin to close over on them. They are soon separated as the blades close in front of them. Running on the opposite sides of each other, Thomas launches himself into the path that Minnow is on. They soon escape that section, but the ground starts to lift up, causing a platform to almost flatten them. They are forced to take another route, but this route is highly dangerous as the ground is lifting up and collapsing right behind them, and more platforms are falling down right beside them. They see an exit, but it's slowly rising, so they jump up and crawl for their lives, and with no seconds to spare, they get through. Both of them run out of the maze, while all of the bladers are asking what happened. They uncover that a new passage was opened and it could potentially be a way out, but as usual, Gally begins to argue again. They are interrupted by Teresa stating that Albie is awake. They all gather in his room while he is sat upright, completely silent. Thomas begins to speak to him about his discoveries, but Albie shocks everyone by saying that he remembers everything that went on before he was sent into the glade, starting with how Thomas might have been a part of it. Commotion is heard outside, so everyone rushes out, just to find out that the walls are not closing over. They run over to the walls to assess what's going on, but while they are looking around, all of the other walls open. They quickly develop a plan to fight the Grievers off, but they run out of time as the Grievers are shown at the other end of the entrance. They rush to the hospital to check up on Albie, but the Grievers begin to circle their location, picking off anyone that they see. As the Grievers are getting closer, they decide to find a new spot to defend themselves in, but are soon stopped in their tracks as a Griever breaks through one of the huts. As it's about to attack, Teresa, being that smart cookie that she is, grabs a Molotov and throws it at the Griever, injuring it and giving them enough time to run away again. Everyone makes it to another hut to hide, but the Grievers are heard lingering around outside. It goes quiet, but then a Griever breaks through the roof and pulls out the support beam holding the fort up, causing it to collapse. Chuck is then grabbed by the Griever, but Thomas is able to hold on to his arm. In the midst of everyone's struggle, Albie uses a machete to hack away at the Griever's arm, causing it to let Chuck go. But just as they think that they will be okay now, Albie is then grabbed and thrown away. They leave the hut that they were in to see the glade fall apart, and Gally is seen walking over to Thomas, with an angry look on his face, and punches him. While he is dragged away, Gally screams about how Thomas is one of the people that sent them there. Thomas did not seem to like this harassment and takes the stinger of Teresa and stabs himself in the leg, causing him to have a little nap. Flashbacks are shown of the same old woman again, surrounded by people all dressed in white. Thomas is shown talking to this woman, while some of the bladers are seen in a tank, being drowned in water. He soon wakes up in the pit with Teresa while Newt, Minnow and Chuck are on the outside. Thomas explains what he saw in his flashbacks and states that him and Teresa were one of the people that put everyone in the glade. It's revealed that Gally has taken control, so they have to try to get through him first before they plan an escape. They are dragged to the maze entrance, and Teresa is tied to a wooden pole, but while they are lifting up Thomas, he is able to escape from them, and all of the bladers that are a part of the plan take control over the situation. Soon after, other bladers join their little rebellion. After them trying to convince Gally to come with them, and him refusing, they all run into the maze. All of them make it to the pathway that leads to the way out, but a Griever is in the way, so they all rush towards it. They finally push the Griever of the side of the path, but multiple Grievers then climb up from the side. Everyone is fighting off against them, while Teresa and Chuck are trying to get the doors to open, but it now requires a code. They start calling out the sequence of each section, but in the middle of doing that, a Griever came falling down, landing on Minnow. One of the bladers, Jeff, saves him, but is killed following this act of heroism. They finally unlock the door and everyone gets in. Meanwhile, all of the walls are coming down on top of all of the Grievers, killing them all. Then the doors close, and it reopens on the other side to reveal an underground tunnel. They walk down the tunnel and through an exit door, but only to uncover a room with multiple dead bodies on the floor. Everyone walks through the room, confused at what's happened, until Thomas presses a button and a video recording displays of the same woman from earlier, who introduces herself as Dr. Ava Page. She explains that they all completed maze trials and that the sun scorched the world, causing fires worldwide, and that a deadly virus, known as the flare, came about, turning people into zombies. They walk over to an exit, but Gally appears in the back, with a gun and the same device that unlocks the door to the way out, but he has been stung. He attempts to force them not to leave and points the gun at them, all while Thomas is talking him out of it. This doesn't work, so he pulls the trigger, but Minnow is able to throw a spear through his heart. He falls to the ground, but Chuck begins to act weird. It turns out that he was shot in the midst of this exchange. He then falls to the ground and sadly dies right after. While Thomas is crying over Chuck, the doors open and a rescue team comes in to escort them all out, but Thomas has to get trailed away. The movie ends with them all running towards a helicopter, in a sand-filled city, and flying off to see an overview of the maze.
Yeah!
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to turn on notifications to get the best Rap Cinema updates.